Hi, everybody. I'm Lori Hines with Just Among Friends. Welcome to another episode where we bring you guest speakers on a range of topics, all related to our mission of cultivating hearts to align with Israel, the land of Israel, and the Jewish people with no hidden agenda. We look forward to you joining us, whether you're here with us today live or you're watching this recording. Welcome. And we hope that you will check out our previous guest speakers and also who we have coming up next and in the coming weeks and months. You can find all of our guest speakers, the recording of those presentations on our YouTube channel, and you can also join our email list. Before we get started with today's speaker, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors. That's Ann Stacy with TexansForASafeIsrael.org, Mike Isley with TexinsForIsrael.com, and myself, Lori Hines, with ATasteOfIsrael.com. We all have our individual interests in supporting the land of Israel and the Jewish people, but together we've come and joined forces to enlarge this circle of friends. So welcome. Before we get to today's speaker, I want to just say a couple of upcoming speakers. Next Sunday, we're going to be having Pastor Trey Graham with First Melissa. He's a pastor of a church in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You're going to want to hear what he has to say. It's fantastic. He's an amazing Zionist, biblical Zionist, and he is a friend to the Jewish people. And then that will be followed by Rabbi Yehuda Glick. He'll be joining us live from Jerusalem. Very excited about that. And then today's speaker is Doug Hershey. Doug is with us today. He's going to speak. Before we turn the mic over to Doug, I want to take a second. Something unexpected has come up that we need to alert you on. This was unplanned. This just came across my path this afternoon. So we feel it's very important that our listeners know about what's going on at this moment in the land of Israel. So I think Ann Stacy is going to share with us what's going on right now as we speak. It's not a good situation, but you need to know what's going on. So let's see. Ann, if you are ready, please give us this breaking news alert.
Well, I got a call about 25 minutes ago from Judy Kadish of Americans for a Safe Israel. She is represents the group that I'm represent here in Texas, but I'm one of the few Christians involved in it. It's about 99% Jewish, mostly Orthodox, and that's where I have made the contacts that have helped me to understand the land issue. But she was just absolutely at the point of tears. I'd just like to read you just a few sentences. Thousands of soldiers, thousands, all officers, they gear up for Eviatar evacuation on Israel National News. Thousands of soldiers, officers gear up for Eviatar evacuation and demolition of a Samaria community expected to take hours to do. IDF police prepare for a complex operation. And what is so disgusting about this is God's land. It was on state land to start with. If any of you know who Daniela Weiss is, she was instrumental in helping them create this community. There's about 40 families there. There's a reason for this. And for them to go and demolish it, they have to pass all sorts of Arab villages that have been built since. And they're not doing one thing to that. So, my question is, I had hoped, even though that with the crazy coalition that they have over there, that Naftali Bennett would step up to the plate because he's supposed to be such a friend of Judea and Samaria. This is really sad, sad news. If you go to israelnationalnews.com, you'll find more on the story. So I'm sorry to start it this way, but it's certainly something we need to know about and a matter for prayer.
You're right, Ann. It is a matter for us to know about and to definitely pray, set aside some time to pray today and for that community. One of the organizers of that community is Nati Ram. He is an Israeli attorney. He's an activist for Judea and Samaria and these particular communities. And we actually interviewed him recently, and I'm going to share that interview with you guys soon. And he was telling me how they built that community and what a miracle it is, and why they've chosen that location to build that community. So more on that to come, but for now, let's keep that community in our prayers, as it's not looking really positive at the moment. So, Israel's a complex place, and I've always said being the leader of Israel is the hardest job in the world, and so we need to pray for their leaders especially as well. So that brings us to, I guess, going a different direction of how also inspiring Israel can be, and the Jewish people. And that is going to be I think maybe the main, the common denominator today of Doug Hershey's presentation. So I'm very excited to welcome you, Doug. Welcome, Doug Hershey. Doug is an author, and he is the founder of Ezra Adventure Tours to Israel. And I met Doug while I was searching for someone who would be called like a vine dresser, someone who understood the Jewish people and our role as Gentiles and with the land of Israel. And we had a conversation, and then one thing led to another. And he was in Austin speaking at a presentation we put together on why Israel matters. And he co-hosted with an Orthodox Jew. It was fantastic. And that was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago maybe. And since then, you have come out with 2 new books. Welcome, Doug. How are you?
Great. Good to be on with everybody. Some of you I've known, some of you, most of you, I suppose, are new, but it's great to be with you all for sure.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So tell us, first of all, where are you at right now? Because you travel all over the world.
Well, I actually just got back from Dallas a couple of days ago. I was down at the NRB with the first part of my next media tour with books. But prior to COVID, I spend about 6 months of the year in the Galilee. And when I'm in the States, I'm in Portland, a little bit north of Portland, Maine. So I'm currently here now. So for you Texans, when it hits, it's going to be close to 90 today, and like people are like, it's the end of the world in Portland when it's there's jokes in Maine here that there's 2 seasons. There's winter and there's like August 1st, and so summers come early this year for sure. But
that's so funny. Yeah, we have saying in Texas, there's 2 seasons. There's summer and there's summer.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, we're glad to have you again today, and I. Before we even go into your books, I just want to start, I think it's so important for us to learn the connection, like where this connection began with you as a Christian here in America, and now you're spending 6 months of the year in the Galilee. How did this happen? How did you first get connected to the land and the Jewish people? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, and sort of the course of the last few years, I've discovered some of my Jewish heritage. My great grandparents on my mother's side. I don't know why anybody didn't put this together before, but my great grandparents on my mother's side were named Israel and Leah, and I don't know why. I don't know why anybody didn't think like, hey, maybe this is a Jewish family, but I grew up in a Christian home, and I often am asked, like, how do I get connected, or how did I get into what I'm into, or where did the love come from? And I really, outside of just God kind of placing it in my DNA, I don't really know that I have an answer for that. I remember a very vivid moment, probably in my mid-teens, where I had a revelation, I suppose, of just reading through the scriptures and going, wait a minute, do you mean that the Jewish people today in the nation of Israel in the Middle East right now, that's the same people and the same family and the same bloodline as the people in the Bible? Like, it was like the light bulb came on at that point in sort of my mid-teens of like, wait a minute, like if this is the same family and this is the family that God chose to do a bunch of stuff throughout the earth with, then I would really like to get to know that family better. And then, like as many of you, I see many of you are nodding. I mean, some of you probably remember the moment where you're going, wait a minute, Jesus is Jewish, and the light bulb kind of comes on. You're going. So it was even actually for me, it was even before that whole Jesus is Jewish connection. It was like, wait a minute, the bloodline in the Middle East is the same as in the Bible. So I remember having that connection, and then again, that was probably mid-teens, and my first trip to Israel was probably I was probably 21, 22, something like that. And I just had again, just another moment of, I'm sure many of you that have been remembering back your first or second time that you just go, wow, like this isn't like any other country or any other place. I remember being on the Mount of Olives and just having a moment with the Lord where I was actually noticing these white puffy clouds roll over the old city. It was about time of Sukkot in the fall, and it was a nice cool breeze. And I'm watching these white puffy clouds roll over the old city, and I was so struck by those clouds. I just went, man, those look just like the white puffy clouds that roll over my house, like when, from where I live in the States. And again, they just had this moment of like, everything is very real people, real problems, real issues, real struggles, real promises and real prophecies that were on the heart of God that he was bringing back together. And so from that point, I've always enjoyed history. And so at that point, I really sort of made that a focus for me of like, what has this land experienced and what has this gone through in the last, 2,000, 3,000 years? Like what exactly has happened? And of course, growing up in churches where you hear all sorts of different opinions about prophecy in the land, and what this has happened, well, that hasn't happened yet, and that's not happening until the millennium, and that's not until whatever, no one will know until Jesus comes back, that kind of sort of the sort of Christian cop-out answers. But I never really enjoyed the cop-out answers. I always wanted to kind of dig into some history and really understand what was going on. And so all of that started, I guess, to answer your initial question, all of that started with this initial moment in my mid-teens of just kind of reading the scriptures. And then since then, from that time, I'd always kind of joked and said to my friends, like, if I would find out that my family was Jewish somewhere along the line, it would make sense of why I feel so strongly about the scriptures or how I do in the land. And then, like I said, it was probably 7 or 8 years ago, I was unexpectedly finding some of that heritage in my past as well. It's like, oh, that makes a little more sense of kind of who I am and what I'm involved with now.
So interesting. It's so funny you use the word light bulb moment, and so many of our speakers, especially the Christians for sure, that they have the same kind of experience, very similar. They all had a moment, a very defined moment in time that they were awakened to either the reality of the Jewish people connected to scripture, like you were saying, or the importance of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, God, in God's plan. It's so amazing to see people have these light bulb moments, including myself. I was the same way. So let's talk about Ezra Adventures. Okay, so I know that you love all this adventure travel and you do some amazing tours that I don't know of anybody else doing the kind of tours that you do. So that's unique. But tell us, how did you start Ezra Adventures and why did you name it Ezra Adventures?
Yeah, two things. Ezra, or Ezra in Hebrew, means help. And so initially we were bringing people over that wanted to not only experience the land, but experience really what the needs were and to help in the needs. And we've been involved with building projects for new immigrants coming in. We've been involved with some food distribution for Palestinian Christians. We've been involved with working with Holocaust survivors and doing dinners and presentations for them, and really even just having a lot of my groups sit and listen to their stories. But that's Ezra was intended of not just coming to see the land, but really coming to help. And then secondly, Ezra in the scriptures was a guy that at the time was bringing helping to bring the people back to the land, and most that were coming back to the land at the time of Ezra were secular. And so Ezra is doing his best to sort of reconnect this secular community back to the roots of the God of Israel and the land of Israel. And I mean, that's the story really of Ezra and Nehemiah and that time frame. And here we are really in the same type of time in that the Jewish people are returning to the land. Very much of them are secular. They have, of course, some of the traditional history, but really as far as having like this heart connection to their God and to the people, or for the people to have this connection to their God and to the land, it's not, it's very similar to Ezra at the time of Ezra. So that was something, those two things for me was something that just really ignited my heart in sort of times and seasons that we're in.
Yeah, interesting. Give us a quick, sample of one of your tours. What are the kind of tours that you do?
Yeah, so I tell our groups, I could bring the same group probably 4 or 5 times through this little country, and it would be brand new every time with brand new people and connections and adventure aspects. But we do adventure day trips, unique biblical sites, and then again, of course, there's different projects, or at least connecting with Holocaust survivors and the best options that we can. So we've done everything from taking groups snow skiing on Mount Hermon, to scuba diving in the Red Sea, to dune buggies and firearms training with some special forces down in Efrat, and anything and pretty much I just tell my groups, like, if you want to go skydiving in Israel, we can arrange that, and and really sort of everything in between. And as many of you know, I mean, any sort of first time groups, there's just places that people have to experience. You have to spend several days in Jerusalem. You have to float in the Dead Sea. You have to get on a boat in the Galilee and just kind of soak in that atmosphere that's there. And so there's some kind of old standards, but aside from that, I mean, I've taken groups 4x4 through the Golan Heights, in between, minefields, and finding secret hot springs back in the back near the Jordanian border and such. And so there's 101 things to really do. And so we customize that around our small groups. And so we like to have our groups 8, maybe 10, 12 at the absolute most. But there's places I can get groups of 8 or 10 people into that I can't get groups of 15 or 20 into. And so we like those sort of unique personal experiences. And when we have a group that's small as well, then we can get in on a Jewish home for Shabbat, rather than like in sort of home related interpersonal connections that way. And so that's really the intention of again, sort of in the time of Ezra, of connecting the nations with the people that are returning.
Fantastic. I want to talk more about the Jewish people returning and the role of Christians and all that. But before we leave your touring company information, I think during Corona, you also added trips to Turkey, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, as well as all of you probably know, Israel's being still a little ridiculous in terms of foreign travel coming in, and so in the middle of that, I saw that Turkey was one of the few countries that were open, and for a lot of my Christian travelers, of course, that's Ephesus and the 7 churches of Revelation, and the book of Galatians and Ephesians, and most of the travels in the book of Acts is through the nation of Turkey. And so we've already taken a couple groups. I have another one going in the end of July that I won't be leading, but have partnered with a great company in Turkey. And so looking to not only do that, but Lord willing, by the end of the year, we're looking to open up Greece for my travelers as well. So we're kind of expanding with keeping sort of that heart of Israel, but then when we're taking groups through the book of Acts into Turkey, teaching from a very Jewish perspective of like, here's Rabbi Saul, teaching in these churches. This is what John as a Jew is writing. This is what he's talking about, or this is the Jewish perspective behind a lot of that, and so still keeping a very much of a Jewish focus of the scriptures and of the Jewish men that were the apostles that were going out. And so I'm finding that apparently that's pretty unique as well, as taking people to Turkey with a very Jewish Jewish perspective of the new covenant. Okay,
fantastic. Well, we're excited for you, Doug. Hearing you talk about that Jewish perspective from a Christian in teaching Christians, I have to just kind of preface this next question with my own experience with you doing presentation when you came to Austin and did that presentation for us on why Israel matters. Mm-hmm. One of our biggest points here at Just Among Friends is we will not and we don't tolerate proselytizing the Jewish people. We're not, that's not us, and we don't want that to be part of, anybody to think that we do that. We want to come alongside of them. Well, connecting to when you were in Austin, we had a Q&A session, and we asked, with someone, a Christian, asked you guys, you and the Orthodox Jew, what about Jesus? They were the typical Christian question from a position, he was asking from a position of proselytizing. And I thought your response was so brilliant and so good. I really had never heard anybody articulate it the way you did. I'd like for you to speak to that. It was about being set apart, the Jewish people being set apart. So if you were speaking to this audience, you are, if you were speaking to an audience about what is unique about the Jewish people, why shouldn't we proselytize them? What is unique about them? What would you say to that?
Yeah, from a Christian perspective, there's no other nation in the scriptures that says that God has placed a partial blinding on, not a full blinding, but a partial one. And there's no other nation on earth where God says that all of the nation will be saved, all of Israel will be saved, both Old and New Covenant. So, when sometimes I'll have groups, you're really excited and really zealous to be to Israel, and then someone will say something like, well, asking me about if they're handing out tracts or when are Jewish people getting saved. And so it's like, okay, let's have this conversation right out of the gate. But and what I say is this, and this is a popular conversation that I have with a lot of churches that have never been to Israel, is two things really. There are multiple Christian ministries and missions organizations that do really amazing things around the world. And I don't know that I said this in Austin, but there are really amazing mission organizations that do great stuff around the world. But when they come to Israel, they try to do the same thing in Israel, and it fails and it falls flat. And that their organization, while they're successful everywhere else, when they try to do the same thing in Israel and treat Israel like all the other nations, there's no traction. It doesn't get anywhere. But that was part of the call of God on the nation of Israel. You are set apart and you are to be unique. And we often think of it in terms of in spiritual terms, and that, well, Israel is set apart, by God for spiritual purposes. But, anytime that Israel has tried to be like everybody else, both in the Bible and in modern history, it has failed miserably. Like, it's been awful. And anytime that Israel has just been a very pioneering nation and been the startup nation and creating and doing unique things in the earth and being different than everyone else, they've excelled. And so the same is true for Christian groups when we, or really any other organizations, whether Christian or not, when we treat Israel like everybody else, it just simply doesn't work. When you treat Israel as something unique, something different, something that has been set apart by God or been chosen for some sort of purpose, even if you don't have any idea what that means. All I know is that even if you're just coming in saying they've been chosen for something, but God says that they're special or important, so I should treat them special and important as well, you have far more traction and you have far more favor in the land than those just kind of showing up. But and the second point is in terms of how sort of the West views salvation, is that, if this is the only nation that has a partial hardening or a partial blinding on for a certain amount of time, and then God says that all of the nation will be saved, I don't know what the whole nation will be saved looks like, but I'm pretty sure that it's probably not in the Western Christian mainstream church tradition of what that means to be saved. But regardless, according to God's standards, that's what he promises. And so when he's making that promise, when we're going to Israel, it's not even so much of like, how am I, and I think this was the point that I was making in Austin, I make other places as well, is that this isn't about something of like, I'm carrying something special for this nation. It's more of like, it's pretty clear that God has a plan for Israel from the very beginning to the very end. That plan, he's already have the plan. And so it's more of us coming in humility and saying, God, where do I fit in? And where are you at in this plan? And how can I help get involved with you with what you're doing in this nation? Because
Yeah.
if all the nation is going to be saved, that's going to happen. I dare say it's just any type of predestination kind of silliness, but I want to just simply get involved with what God is doing, because just the way that he prophesied and said that he's going to gather back the people from the four corners of the earth. It's one of the most repeated promises in the Old Covenant. He said in both the Old and New Covenant that all the nation will be saved. So
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but according to his standards, when the people return, there's going to come a point where he's going to change their hearts, and he's going to sprinkle clean water on them, and then he's going to bring a cleansing, and then he's going to wash them, and then they're going to look upon the one whom they've pierced and mourn for him like an only son. These are things that he already has planned. And however that plan is and wherever that's at in his plan, I don't have any idea, but I would like to be a part of it. And so when I'm in the land, it's more of like, okay, God, just help me fit into what you're doing, and not, kind of rise above the, all the other stuff that's going on.
Okay. Well, that's pretty much what you said. The only other word I can think of that I heard you say in Austin is covenant. And it's the same thing what you just said. They are in covenant with God the Father. They're his children.
Yeah.
And I just thought what you said was so profound by setting them up. They're set apart. And you're right. We must come in humility. And we don't need to know everything, do we?
No, not at all. I mean, that's part of, in the Old Covenant and in the Torah. I mean, how you would show humility is that you would ask questions, and
Yeah,
you'd say like God's telling Moses, like, why don't you step away and I'm going to wipe them all out and I'm going to start over. And he says, well, I have a question. Like, if you do that, what are the Egyptians going to say? Or
right.
I mean, it's just, his questions was a way to show humility and to show faith and to say, like, you clearly have a plan, so help me learn what you're doing. And it's really the same today.
I love that. Framing that up for us. Thank you, Doug. That's really, really beautiful. And so let us be humble in this. Okay, so I want to talk about your books, because those books, again, like I told you when I wrote you after I got my book, the first one, I don't think anybody in the world has ever done a book like you've done and that you're doing, the second sequel. I mean, this thing has just taken off. It is incredible what the book you wrote, the first one, and now your second one's about to come out. So I want you to share with us about your first book and tell us how that got started, and then take us to where you're at today.
Yeah, so the first one, and just so I know who I'm talking to, how many of you have, this is Israel Rising. How many of you have a copy of it?
I have several.
All right, Ari's holding his up. Thank you, Ari. That looks good, man. So Israel Rising actually came out of Ezra Adventures. I actually write a little bit about it in the foreword, but I'm taking a group down the Jordan Valley from the Galilee down to the Dead Sea, and I'm kind of watching this whole land revive over the amount of times. And I just began wondering, like, wow, I wonder if this is what Ezekiel talked about in terms of Ezekiel 36, when he said that when the Jewish people return, that the land will physically respond and put forth fruit. Wow, Ari, wow, look at that. You got the very, very first one, The Christian's Biblical Guide to Understanding Israel. How about that?
Oh, I have that too. Yeah, that's right. We forgot about that book, Doug. Sorry.
No, that was one from like 10 years ago. That's
a great one.
Sandra, there you go. I love it. So most of you then are clearly familiar with it, but what behind the scenes, when I put that book together, I actually didn't know if anybody would care. I didn't know that if anybody would be like, that's kind of cool. I just was looking at it as an advertisement for Ezra Adventures, thinking that, if in a couple years from now I break even on it, it'll be good advertising and it'll get some pictures, and I could do it for family who might not ever get a chance to get to Israel. Well, long story short, the first print run of 10,000 was sold out before the release date of Israel Rising, and then the secular publisher that I was a Jewish publisher in New York City, they were scrambling to get the second printing together, and so up till now we've sold probably about 45,000 copies, and and now Tyndale Publishing picked up Israel Rising and my brand new one, Jerusalem Rising, that I'll show you in just a second. But yeah, Israel Rising has kind of caused everything to go in a different direction for me. And some of you know Rabbi Tuli Weiss. I don't know if you've ever had him on or not.
He's on. He's going to be on. He's on our list. Yeah.
Excellent. Great. So Tuli was kind enough to write the foreword to Israel Rising. And I remember standing in his office even before we were doing the photo shoots and we were talking, and Lori, he said almost the same thing that you did. He said, I don't know that anybody's ever done this before. Like, I don't know, like you're doing something really special for Israel. And he said, I mean, it was almost like he was prophesying to me at the time. He said, I see volume 2 and 3 and 4, like this could just go on and on. Like this could really become your life's work. And at that time I was like, let me get through the first one and see if anybody cares, or not. But like Tuli was, his vision was on it. And I've actually emailed him and thanked him for that recently, just saying, like, I remember having that moment thinking maybe you were a little crazy, but apparently I was the one with, pretty small vision for that.
That's so funny. Let me ask you, for our listeners, let's go back for a second and tell them, what kind of book is Israel Rising? Is it a historical book? I mean, is it a novel, or what is this? What kind of book is it?
Yeah, so Israel Rising is the first of a series called Ancient Prophecy, Modern Lens, and with the intention of providing visual documentation of ancient prophecy that's captured through a modern lens, whether that be film or photography. And so there's 3 aspects to these photo books. They're large sort of coffee table photo books, and there's 3 aspects to it. One is an ancient prophecy, which is something from the prophets in the Old Covenant. One is a dose of history, and then and now photography that then point back to the prophecy. And so I specifically, I'm a Christian, but didn't want to write a Christian book, and so I wanted to have that to be pretty evident. Like I intentionally wrote it as sort of as an aspiritual sort of perspective. So, I in this time of actually something that probably, Lori, I don't know if I've ever told you, but prior to crowdfunding Israel Rising, I actually had presented it to National Geographic and connected the idea, and was actually looking to get some funding from some of their grants. And they actually went through it and they said that they liked it, but they actually had run out of grant money, and and it just never went that way. So, but I learned a lot from writing that in terms of like, they were coaching me, like, write it like, sort of this, have some sort of mysterious kind of mystique of like sort of Indiana Jones style thing of like ancient prophecies and, dusty tombs and skulls and, venturing through the desert and that kind of thing. And so, I specifically called it ancient prophecy because there's no other people group on earth that, or throughout history, that has any type of ancient writings that foretell the history or the destruction or the scattering of their people, to then have those same people come back to the same piece of real estate. There's no people group in history that has any writings like that, let alone have the track record of accuracy as the Jewish people through the Old Testament.
That in itself is mind blowing. That's what blew my mind immediately when I first connected to Israel. Yeah.
It is. And so there are just, again, putting Bible prophecy aside, there's all of these historical anomalies that continue to surround the Jewish people. And so I wanted to write it from that particular viewpoint. And so I have this ancient prophecy, which is really just Ezekiel 36. And in Israel Rising, there are eyewitness accounts from Christians, Muslims, and Jews for almost every century for 2,000 years, describing what the land looked like up until some of the more modern photos. And I think the oldest I have in Israel Rising, I think, is the 1880s, 1880s to 1940s. And then I went back with a pro photographer and reshot the angles as closely as possible to show how much the land has revived under Jewish sovereignty. So there's over 100 photo comparisons from over 25 locations around Israel, and you're right, Lori, and Rabbi Tuli as well. I mean, I realized later once I was into it that I actually had this. My first publisher came to me and they said, we rarely get to say this, but like when the book comes out, like you'll have the corner market. There is no other book like it.
Amazing.
It's never been
Wow.
done before, and no one is telling the story that you are.
That's amazing. Before we go to your new book that's about to be released, can you show us a sample from Israel Rising?
Yeah. So so some of you, I know some of you already have it, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
But you know, here's Mount Tivor is one of my favorites. Actually, one of the photos, if I was doing interviews, or when I was doing interviews with on this one, I would often show this photo because it's the story behind it. This is Ari and Sandra. It's on page 102, but it's of the coastal plains, and the area here that is shown is an area called Hadera. And in the 1880s, prior to the 1880s, it was a swamp, and it was
wow.
called the cursed land by the Ottomans. And so so as Jewish immigration is returning in the 1880s, they have some money to purchase, and of course the Ottomans are like, hey, you know, we got some great land to sell you. It's the cursed land. Nothing grows, no one lives there, and it's you know, mosquito infested swamp. And so Jewish pioneers are literally getting into the swamp, draining the swamps, introducing fish into the water in certain places to eat mosquito larvae, are planting eucalyptus trees to help absorb the massive amount of water. And actually, something else that one of my guides that I use in Israel was telling me about that I didn't know was Baron de Rothschild had actually helped move an entire African tribe. He did some research and funded the entire tribe to move. And I'm looking here for my conversation when I was asking him about it. But I'm looking here to find out. Anyhow, he moves this African tribe, which is the Rawarna, the Rawarna tribe. They between the border of Sudan and Egypt. He found that this particular tribe is immune to malaria.
Wow.
The entire tribe is immune to malaria, and so Baron de Rothschild pays for the entire village to move up
Wow.
to just a little bit north of Hadera to work in the swamps, paid them to work in the swamps, and that tribe is actually still living. Their village is still nearby. And so
Wow.
so there's just amazing miracles that happen. Anyhow, the land is, you know, reviving on just in a way that it never has before. And so to be able to capture that with sort of then and now photography to point back to Ezekiel 36 was really special for me, and continues.
Amazing. Well, I want to go to Jerusalem Rising, and I want to have time for Q&A at the end if anybody has a question. But I just have to say, what an adventure it must have been in itself, producing this book over the years, all the trips you went on, researching, meeting locals that had, you know, pictures under their mattresses. And who knows where those pictures were found. I mean, what an incredible experience.
Yeah, in fact, I write a little bit about it in Israel Rising about my helicopter trip. We chartered a helicopter for 3 hours to in Tel Aviv. We did some shots over Tel Aviv, flew north up to the Galilee, and then flew straight down over Judea and Samaria towards Jerusalem. And that flight south in the helicopter, it was kind of funny. I wrote a little bit about it in Israel Rising. It's like, you know, at least in the United States, as many of you know, I mean, you sign your life away when you're doing something like this. I mean, you're signing legal everything, and there was nothing to sign. Some guy comes out of the office and says, "So, you guys ready to go?" And the helicopter is like the size of a little VW bug, and there's 2 seats in the front, 2 in the back, and as we're walking towards the helicopter, we're kind of looking. I mean, I'm looking at him, and he says, "Oh. You know, a few things," and this is, you know, I mean, you know, Israelis, they're just kind of like, yeah, a few things I should tell you. You know, when we're flying, keep your hands inside the helicopter. You know, keep your seatbelt on, which was like, and I write in the book, it was like a 1980s Buick seatbelt. I mean, it was like, click, like it was there, like there's no way that was going to work for anything. And then he says, "Oh yeah, when you get out of the helicopter, wait till the blades stop turning before you get out, and okay, let's go." And so but as we're flying, that was our safety instructions for the helicopter for 3 hours over Israel. But as we're flying from the Galilee straight down over Judea and Samaria, we look to the right and we can see the sun off the Mediterranean, and we look to the left and we can see the mountains in Jordan. And I realize as we're flying south, we're flying over the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria, and literally can see the entire width of the country from the air.
Wow.
And I made that comment to the pilot, and he kind of smiled and he says, it's a small country, but it's ours.
Oh.
And it was just this, sort of heartwarming moment. I mean, he was a pilot, and fought in a few wars. I'm sure he flew, countless missions back and forth. But, it was soon after he said that, he said, look ahead, and some of the clouds had started parting. It was like the movies. I mean, as we're flying, you can see like the mountains up ahead, and then you see the city up on the mountain. And we realized that like we're getting our first glimpse of Jerusalem as we're flying in. I mean, it was just, I will never forget it.
I'm sure. What a special moment for you, Doug. That's incredible. Well, we want to talk about Jerusalem Rising. So that one was Israel Rising, where you documented prophecy coming to life since the Jewish people have returned to the nation in, I guess, from the north to the south, different regions of the country. That was your first book for the photo book. But this one, new one coming out, is Jerusalem Rising. Tell us about that, and when and where can we get it? It's gorgeous.
Jerusalem Rising is volume 2. And so, so the ancient prophecy, I appreciate the smile, Ari. We can get you on the list already. But Jerusalem Rising, the ancient prophecy is Zechariah 8, when God is saying to Israel about, I'm going to return to Zion, I'm going to return to Jerusalem and dwell with my people. Old men and old women will, again, be safely in the streets. Children will be playing in the squares, and the nations will be flooding to Jerusalem like never before. And so, so part of that, again, I wanted to document, and really it was actually over one of the aerial flights over Jerusalem during Israel Rising that I just, excuse me, I had a sort of a moment again of just sort of something's kind of jumped in my heart. And I thought, man, I need to come back and spend more time in Jerusalem. So I found, I thought, but if I'm going to do Jerusalem, I mean, I need to do it right. So I need to find the oldest photos of Jerusalem ever taken. So I've got in the book, I'll give you a little sneak peek here. In the book are some of the oldest photos of Jerusalem taken from 1844. And why I have, one is, it's the same image, but it's flipped. There's this amazing story, and I'll tell you, and I'll give you a second look. But in 1844, there's a French photographer that learns this new style of photography called this daguerreotype, which is this, it's like this wooden box that you have a copper plate covered in silver, and there's some chemicals and things that are put on the plate, and you put it in the box, and you open the shutter for 1 to 5 minutes, and the light kind of burns on there, and you shut it. And then when you pull out, when you pull out the photo plate and turn it around, that's your image. And that's what was done in 1844. And so, but the thing is that it's actually a mirror image. So if you're taking a daguerreotype photo of me and I'm waving my left hand, it looks like I'm waving my right hand because it's a reverse image. And so, he's a painter. So he takes all of this stuff. He takes over 900 photos or 900 of these photo plates from all over the Mediterranean region, of course, with Jerusalem included. He goes back to Paris, uses some of them to paint, a couple books or some, to publish some things. And all of these plates get put away in these boxes, and no one really knows about them until about 30 years after he dies in the 1920s. His neighbor buys his dilapidated estate and finds these boxes, and people are just learning about, these photos, because by that time it was already had been outdated. Then it kind of falls off the world stage again until in 2003, some of these actual plates are being sold at like, high-end auctions like Christie's auctions for, I think a Saudi Arabian prince bought one for like $900,000, and everybody's like, whoa, like who is this guy and who's this French guy? Anyhow, so it wasn't until 2014 that the Smithsonian published for the first time ever the oldest photos of Jerusalem. And so so this is the actual photo of of one of the photos from 1844 of his daguerreotype style photography. But with one small aspect is that the Smithsonian was publishing the actual daguerreotype, which, if you remember, is a reverse image. So I know Jerusalem like you may know your own hometown. Like I spend a lot of time in Jerusalem, and I would look at these photos and go, I know the Dome of the Rock, I know the Temple Mount. I have no idea where that photo is taken from, until a friend of mine said, if you turn it around, it might clarify. And like, again, sort of the light bulb came on. I turned it around, and then it looks like this. And I go, I know exactly where that's at.
Yeah.
And so I've done that for several of the oldest photos. And as far as I know, I think it's the first time that's ever been published that those photos have been reversed to give the viewer an actual true view visual of what the city looked like in 1844. So not only is it published in the correct way for the first time in 175 years, but then with me and with Eden Ram and my team, Eden was my photographer, we hunted down a lot of those locations and recreated those shots again, probably for the first time ever. And then as far as the length of time, and I'm not sure, I'm still kind of looking to find out if this is true or not, but sort of as I was kind of putting some of this information together for some of these media tours, it very well may, just like in the history of photography, it very well may be the longest period of time between a then photo and a now photo that covers 175 years in between the two of Jerusalem. So that happens in 1844. And what also, and I didn't put this in the book, but what also happens in 1844 is that there's an Ottoman Sultan that is trying to revitalize the Ottoman Empire, and he's trying to bring some industry in, trying to understand where the kingdom is at that time, where the empire is at. And so he orders he orders a census of Jerusalem. And it turns out, well, really of the entire empire, but of course, Jerusalem is part of the Ottoman Empire in 1844. So it's the first census, as far as I know, the first census ever taken of Jerusalem since biblical times was also 1844, which is the exact year that we have the photos from this French photographer. So God and his godness has this French photographer working one angle, has this Ottoman Sultan working the other, and this on the exact same year of 1844. So now you can see exactly what the city looked like, knowing that from the Ottoman, this is the true view of the city here. So from 1844, when the Ottomans, who are Muslim, record that there are only 15,000 people in Jerusalem, and the majority population is over 7,000 Jewish inhabitants, which means that there's a Jewish majority in Jerusalem in 1844, and that's what the city looks like with only 15,000 people. And so I found that exact rock outcropping and retook the photo, and that's what it looks like today.
Wow.
So it's the exact same. So this is 15,000 people, and this is close. And this is actually we cropped the photo so that it would fit exactly with this one, but we have the photo that's much larger than this one. Jerusalem right now is close to 1 million people, and so this is 1844. The first wave of Aliyah doesn't happen until the early 1880s, and so God in his infinite wisdom, knowing that the population, he's about to explode the population, is giving us a visual by using some crazy French photographer in Paris, or a French painter. He's not even a photographer. He's a painter, and some Ottoman Sultan on the exact same year to do the work, to do the research, so that we can look at that photo in 1844 and say, that's what the city looked like with 15,000 people, and never again will it ever be that small again. And so to be able to use this as a visual. And so again, many of Jerusalem in its suburbs and is well over 1 million. I mean, let's just talk about population expansion. But it's what the prophet said would happen. He says he's going to multiply the people. He's going to multiply man and beast on the land. And so, so that's just one of the photos. So in Jerusalem Rising, there's a lot of groundbreaking work of things that have never been done before, like I described, like those photos, and 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 so there's over 60 photo comparisons, and like Israel Rising, I have them broken up into different sections. So I've got the new city, and I've got the old city, and I've got some panoramic views, and I have them kind of sectioned out into little bits and pieces. And then instead of eyewitness accounts of the city, part of the question I'm looking at in the book is, what is it about Jerusalem? What makes Jerusalem? Why is it that in 1492, and I have this quote in the book, why is it in 1492 that Christopher Columbus is asking that all of the proceeds of his explorations go towards the recovery of Jerusalem? Why is it that Muslim conquerors are insisting that they need to take Jerusalem? Why is it that that from the 3rd and 4th and 5th century, Christians are still flooding to Jerusalem, and rabbis are still weeping over it? And what is it about this city? Because in its in its natural form, it's a meager water source. There's not a lot of natural resources. It's not on any particular trade route. There's no, and I write in the book, like there's no earthly reason why someone would want Jerusalem, but a spiritual reason, that's another matter.
Yeah.
Because it's the only city on earth. Well, it's actually one of two cities. One is Shiloh and the second is Jerusalem. But there's two cities in the Bible where God says, I've placed my name there forever. And there's only one city that God said he's chosen to dwell, and he's going to return to, and we're going to pray for, and we're going to meet him there. He's returning to Jerusalem. And so to be able to put all of those pieces together is sort of what we're doing. And so we're using Zechariah 8 as the prophesied restoration of the city. And so, like Israel Rising, in Jerusalem Rising, I have not quotes about what the land looked like, but I have these historical quotes of longings from Christians and Muslims and Jews, of just things from the Talmud, from things from Muslim writings, from things Christian writings. I've got a quote from the Turkish president Erdogan. Last year, he commented about how Jerusalem is ours, and that still claiming the city. And then I've got President Trump's message as he's moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and he's talking about why that's significant. So I have all of these historical quotes through the ages, and then and now photography showing the revival of a city that was prophesied ahead of time.
As I'm listening to you talk, Doug, again, I'm blown away by your work, my friend. No one is doing what you're doing. No one has done what you're doing. You totally are on assignment from God, in my opinion, my humble opinion. But I think it's so significant, guys, that we are having this conversation over your book, Doug, Jerusalem Rising, here on the 17th of Tammuz, which is today. So we must all get a copy of this book so that we can watch this day, this biblical day, the 17th of Tammuz, because one day it's going to turn from a day of mourning to a day of joy when Jerusalem does rise to what it's going to be, what it's destined to be. Yeah. So we're excited that we happen to have you on this day. It wasn't planned. It wasn't planned that way. Maybe this is a divine appointment. We'll see. So tell us, how can we get a copy of this book?
Yeah, so the book comes out August 3rd. Right now, you can go to JerusalemRising.com. There's a short 60-second trailer on it, and if you pre-order, and it gives you different options, it's really, really easy. You can pre-order through ChristianBooks.com or Amazon or Barnes and Noble, whatever it's. There's several that are listed there. But when you pre-order and then you come back and put in a little bit of your information, there's some bonus things in there as well. So there's a short video of introduction from some teaching I did when I was in Jerusalem, in fact, it's actually not far from that actual rock outcropping that I was just showing you the photos of. But I did some teaching there, and there's one of the then and now comparison photos on. In fact, the old one is from 1860, and the new one is 2019 when I shot it. But I'll show you which one's exactly if I can find it
Oh,
here
please, yes, we want to see
in
this.
the book. But in the bonus material, you'll get both the old and the new photo, so you can have them for you.
Ah,
This is what
great.
you'll get. So this is the photo of Jerusalem from
Wow.
1860. So it's Hebron Road. You're crossing the so Sultan's Pool is like right over here, where now there's a stadium in there now for. So this is coming up from Bethlehem, and then coming up in the old city. So this up here is Jaffa Gate. So this photo is from 1860, and then the new photo is that's the
Wow.
new photo with buses and flags and people. And so that's the then and now photo comparison I give you when you get when you get on JerusalemRising.com and pre-order before August 3rd. And then there's a little welcome video and stuff in there. So there's a few extras on that.
Okay.
And so when being at the NRB in Dallas just over the last couple days, that was sort of the kickoff between now and August 3rd. There's some things coming up. In fact, I hadn't shared this with you, Lori, but because I wasn't able to. But in early July, I'm flying to New Jersey to meet up with Rabbi Jonathan Kahn.
Oh, fun.
Because Jonathan was kind enough. He wrote the introduction to Jerusalem Rising. But as many of you know, they watched The Return back in, I guess it was September. They're planning to do what's in the works is to do The Return Israel in September or maybe October of 2022. And why I'm involved is that they want to be able to use the Ancient Prophecy Modern Lens series as part of the curriculum, as a part of a primary piece of that whole event. And
that is amazing.
So that'll be Israel Rising, Jerusalem Rising, and one that I'm writing right now that I'm not quite yet talking about, but I had which will be volume 3, and I'm hoping to have a manuscript done by October, as I'm in the middle of it now. But I took a portrait photographer back with me to Israel, and I interviewed 30 pioneers of the state of Israel that came from 19 different countries, from 5 different continents, and that moved back to the land between 1946 and 1970 to document how did they get there, what was your experience, what did you find when you were here, and then ask what miracles have you seen, or what are you most proud of? And so I have in that book, the then and now photography will be of the people. And so I have the new portrait photographers and that we did of them, and then all of those people gave us old photos of themselves from like the 40s or 50s. So you'll see that, and there'll be some of their stories about what they experienced and what they were a part of, and what Haifa was like in 1950, and the things and so that I'm very much excited about, and that'll be ready in time for The Return Israel in
I'm excited. I got goosebumps. I can't wait. Can you tell us, can you give us a sneak peek of what the title will be, or not yet?
We're calling it volume 3 as of right now.
Okay, we'll wait. As bad as we want to know. Okay, very good, very good. Well, thank you, Doug, for joining us. Just one more time, JerusalemRising.com. Is that where you can get the book? Okay, that's great. Right. Now, I want to give people a chance to say hello or ask a question. So, guys, if you have a question, let me see. Raise your hand. Ari, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. Shalom from California.
Shalom, shalom.
I'm only Californian here. So anyways, I just wanted to say 2 quick things. First of all, you're mentioning, a lot of us have, I'm like you, I was raised as a Christian, but my background on my mother's side is Jewish. And so, and what a lot of Israelis don't realize is that a lot of us still have this, I don't know if you want to say it's part of our DNA or whatever, but a lot of us have interest, and there's millions of us out here, that are connecting with this. And so, when your books first came out, I made a beeline to it. I had to have it because I have to see things visually, and these things really, really help in that regard. And so I got both of the books, and I made a beeline to purchase these. I absolutely love it. So my question is to you, when these books first came out, I really wanted to have a movie or a DVD of where these shots are taking place, and also going through the historical background. And if you could maybe expound on that, I'll buy it in a heartbeat.
One of the things, and I'll give you a little behind the scenes production things that's being talked about for the return, is because the return was the largest Christian viewed event ever, with almost 50 million people that viewed it, and they're looking to get hundreds of millions of people to view the return Israel as they sort of gather the global population back to Jerusalem. One of the ways that they're doing that, or one of the ways they hope to do that, is because of the success of The Chosen with the app, and people logging on and watching that. There's discussions of doing 6, 8, or 10 different episodes, like hour-long episodes, that would basically be based on the content of my books, which would be like 3 or 4 episodes from Israel Rising, 3 or 4 from Jerusalem Rising, and a few more from the volume 3, and that would involve that exact thing of going back. And I've had some people suggest to me, and Lord willing, it probably will in some time, of doing like an Israel Rising TV show, to be able to do exactly that, to go to some of the locations, talk more about the history, talk a little bit behind the scenes. And like, to me, like when I look at like Caesarea Maritime in Israel Rising, when I look at the new pictures from whatever 2016, that's 5 years ago, those new pictures already look like remarkably old to me. Like so much has changed already in just 5 years. And so I think it would be cool to go back, even in the next a couple of years, to reshoot, not even so much in photography, but to do like a follow-up video, and to do some of the video in some of those exact areas. So all of those things, Ari, that's you're on track. I mean, that's some of the things we're already talking about. So you can be praying along those lines, because all of those things are being talked about, and Lord willing, things get put together as we're talking about doing some of that in preparation to share globally, in preparation for the return Israel. So Lord willing, from our mouth to his ears.
Yes, amen. That's so cool. I'm sitting here thinking, now that God has reestablished his nation, his people, since 1948, we cannot keep up with him. He's just busy.
Yes, it is. So fast.
Yeah, so fast. Okay, we have a question from Mike Isley. Hey, Mike.
Mike.
Hey, Doug. How are you? Good,
man. Good to see you.
Hey, do you know Rabbi Jason Sobel?
Not yet.
Okay, he's a good friend of mine, and I think you need. I'm gonna send him your information today. So I just think you need to. He's an advisor with The Chosen, so he's a great guy. So I just kind of feel like you need to get to know him. So we'll send you stuff.
I very well may be in early July, when I fly down to New Jersey to meet up with Jonathan Kahn. It's going to be with Kevin Jessup and a lot of all of the main leaders of the return. So he very well may be in on that. I don't know.
Okay.
But I'm like they want to do like some photo shoots and such. So they're going to be introducing me as a primary portion of that. So if he's in it as an advisor, I'm sure it won't be long till we
Brother, we're so proud of you. We're so proud of you. You're doing great stuff.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. Okay, anybody else have a question or a comment? Okay, I don't see anybody. All right, great. Well, Doug, again, it was so cool to have you on our show. I mean, it's so unique what you're doing. I love it. I knew what you were doing before you published Israel Rising, but I didn't really understand the depth and the width of what you accomplished with your first book. I was blown away, and I cannot wait to see the same with Jerusalem Rising. What a cool adventure you're on, my friend.
Thank you. I've been really blessed by how well it's been received by the Jewish community as well. It was one of my concerns initially, was that I wanted it to I wanted to really reach far and wide. And so with Israel Rising, I think it was 7 or 8 #1 spots on Amazon, different Amazon charts, and only one of them was in a Christian designation. One somewhere in tour guides and somewhere in Judaism stuff. And so my photographer for Jerusalem Rising actually was in a mall in Tel Aviv, and shot me a video of finding Jerusalem or finding Israel Rising in a mall in Tel Aviv, and it's at the Steinmetzky's at the Ben Gurion Airport. So it's really like an honor for me, really, to kind of quietly sneak into Steinmetzky's at Ben Gurion and watch people page through my book. And I always kind of go in and out, and I'm like, I see the pile shrink and grow and stuff. So that's been pretty cool. But all of that to say, like it's really been special to me to, like Ezra, it's finding, like, helping the returning exiles reconnect with their land. And amazing. Part of the crowdfunding that I did when I was raising money for Israel Rising was a couple gay guys in Tel Aviv, and they actually gave money towards the whole project, and I ended up actually talking to them, and they made the comment of, like, I don't know about the spiritual aspect, but the photos and the history is amazing. And I was like, well, it is, because it's your history and it's your land, and by the way, your prophets kind of foretold the whole thing, so, like, it actually does have some spiritual elements to it. But
that's so cool.
It's been really special to me to see the impact that it's been making in Israel as well.
Right, I can see that, how it just opens up the opportunity for a broader audience of the Jews. Yes, it's fantastic. Well, I have to tell you, I don't know if I told you this, but I was in Jeremy Gimpel's mother's home a few years ago. In 2018, I was there with a friend. They had an event there, and I was in her home, and in her living room, on her coffee table, was your book.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great.
I know, in Jerusalem. So that's amazing. So fun.
That's great.
Well, guys, we are out of time. Thanks again for joining us, Doug. We were so honored to have you. We wish you only high success with your new book and volume 3. Please let us know when it's ready so we can have you back.
Absolutely.
And may God bless everything you're doing and everything you put your hand to, my friend.
Thank you. And
you're welcome.
For some of you that are on Facebook or Instagram, Doug Hershey Author is the best way to keep up with me. And also doughershey.co is my website. I'm about to put a new calendar up there as I'm starting to travel more for speaking engagements, for interviews, for media interviews. I'm also going to be doing a lot of speaking engagements, Lord willing. So that's at doughershey.co. That will be up probably in the next week or two as an updated calendar. And of course, on social media, I'll have all that blasted out as well. So hopefully I'll get to meet some of you more in person as I get around different parts.
Good. Well, thank you, guys. Please connect with Doug on social media. Check out his website, buy his book, get a signed copy, do whatever you can to connect with what he's doing. Thank you, Doug, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here on Just Among Friends. Take care. Have a good week, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes, bye-bye.